Heartwarming truth revealed. Billionaire discovers his son's amazing bond with the unexpected Maid. Richard Thompson stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his opulent Aspen mansion, gazing at the snow-capped peaks that loomed like sentinels outside. His life, draped in luxury and power, made him a king among men yet. In the palace of wealth he built brick by brick, a deep void lingered. His only son, Jake, shuffled through the hallways like a ghost, lost amidst shadows of sketches that told stories of dreams untold. A connection he longed for but never grasped. Enter Maria, a single mother with a heart so full it made Richard feel small. Her laughter filled the corners of the extravagant home that had known too much hollow silence. Armed with a fierce determination, she scrubbed away the glittering grime that overshadowed Richard's family. Every stroke of her hand seemed to breathe life into the lavish but lifeless spaces, carving a bridge across the emotional chasm between father and son. "Hey, you draw this?" Maria asked, eyeing a charcoal sketch of a soaring eagle Jake had left behind. Jake, wearing oversized sweats and a perpetual frown, raised his eyebrows in surprise, nodding timidly. Maria's eyes sparkled as if she struck gold. With each shared moment, at first hushed and hesitant, she nudged him toward the light, coaxing out the colors under the grayscale of expectation that Richard imposed. Meanwhile, Richard buried himself deeper in board meetings, CEOs, and stock market fluctuations, his voice loud in corporate strategy, but muted in his son's life. He was a titan in the business world, commanding respect, yet bewildered by the waves of silence between him and Jake. Time slipped through his fingers like water, yet he didn't even notice. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But when Richard caught wind of Jake's friendship with Maria, an avalanche of resentment buried his heart. What does she know about success? He barked, fists clenched as he confronted Jake, whose spirit he had stifled with diamond-studded expectations. Maria, once a beacon in Jake's dull world, became the lightning rod of Richard's insecurities. The tension of that evening ignited into a heated conversation where Jake finally mustered courage. "It's not about money, Dad. Maria values me," he cried, tears streaming down his face. As Richard saw the hurt flicker in his son's eyes, the walls he'd built around his heart began to tremble. Hoping to salvage this fractured relationship, his heart heavy and mind racing, Richard organized an art exhibit to showcase Jake's work, blinded by his own belief that recognition would heal the wounds. But amidst the glare of the elite crowd, cruel remarks sliced through the air like glass. Jake's spirit shattered on stage, leaving Richard grappling once again with the isolation that his wealth had forged. As hope flickered dimly, it was Maria who rose from the ashes, rallying the community for a gathering to embrace art and personal stories. Richard witnessed the power of unity, the strength of resilience, and a path toward redemption, each brushstroke of this painting unveiling a truth he'd been too blinded to see. Would Richard finally take the leap to redefine success as love instead of status? Could he cross the threshold into a world where gold meant nothing compared to the priceless bond waiting for him on the other side? The thrill of possibility lingered in the air, enticing him to choose love over status, choose connection over power. Richard stood alone in the expansive gallery, which was now only temporarily emptied of the crowd that had belittled his son's art. The harsh laughter and biting critiques still echoed in his mind. Each sound was a dagger aimed not just at Jake, but also at the heart of the man who had, in his quest for success, alienated the very son he yearned to connect with. He could almost hear Jake's heart breaking. The moment had felt like a spotlight that shone too brightly on all their failures, the neglect, the disappointment, and the time lost. Richard's hands trembled, and he ran a finger across the surface of one of Jake's pieces, a vibrant depiction of a sunset over the mountains. How could he have missed how deeply Jake poured his soul into this? "Mr. Thompson?" Maria's voice broke through, soft yet laced with an urgency Richard had never recognized before. She entered the gallery, her expression a blend of determination and empathy. "I think we need to talk." He started, the words catching in his throat. But he couldn't dismiss her. He could feel the gravity of her presence grounding him in this moment of reckoning. "Jake is hurting," she said gently, her eyes searching his. This was supposed to be a celebration for him, a place for him to shine. But all he felt was judgment. The heartbreak in her voice was palpable. Richard clenched his jaw, the pit in his stomach swelling. I thought showcasing his art was the right thing to do. That it would make him proud," he whispered, almost to himself. Maria shook her head. "You know pride comes from acceptance, Richard. He needs to know he is valued for who he is, not just what he can achieve. You've built so much in your life, but maybe it's time to build something different with your son." The raw truth in her words crashed over him like a wave. Could he really let go of his rigid view of success? Could he embrace the chaos and creativity that came with emotional connection? "I don't know how," he admitted, feeling smaller than he ever had in this moment of vulnerability. "You start by listening, by showing up. You have to choose to be present in his life, even when it's messy," Maria urged, her voice steady. "Don't let fear keep you isolated. Remember why you wanted to connect." Richard's mind raced. Her words unlocked something deep inside him. They reminded him of the dreams he once dared to dream for his son, the laughter they had shared at the park, the late-night talks about stars and aspirations. "Will you help me?" he found himself asking, eyes locked on Maria's earnest gaze. "Show me how to be a better father?" Maria smiled softly, and for the first time, Richard could see the potential spark to start anew. The uncertainty of his journey ahead loomed, but so did a flicker of hope. However, just as the weight of their conversation began to lift, a shrill phone ring jolted the air between them. Richard glanced down to see his assistant's name flashing on the screen. He hesitated, torn between the demands of his empire and the chance to rebuild his family. "Take it," Maria urged, recognizing the distraction. "But remember this moment. It's one step towards what you want." He nodded, letting the decision weigh heavy in his chest. The call cut through the connection they had built so effortlessly just seconds ago. With every second he spent on the phone, Richard realized he was at a crossroads. Who would he ultimately choose to prioritize? His business or the ghosts of his past lurking behind the doorway to his son's heart? As he ended the call, he looked up, finding Maria still waiting, a reassuring presence amidst chaos. "What now?" he asked, a question that held the weight of endless possibilities. "Now, you hunt for the courage inside you to step through that door," she replied, her voice filled with resolve. "The time to break the cycle is now." With that, Richard took a deep breath. Would he find strength in the vulnerability of admitting his failures? Or would the comfort of his gilded cage keep him imprisoned? The answer rested just beyond his reach, an answer that could change everything. Richard felt the tension in his muscles, a tightness that was both unfamiliar and painfully familiar. The gallery, once bright and filled with creative energy, now seemed to echo the weight of his choices. Maria's words replayed in his mind, pushing him to confront a truth so deeply buried he nearly suffocated beneath it. He took a moment, staring at the colors swirling in Jake's sunset painting. It was more than just art. It was a representation of what they had lost: joy, connection, trust. With a sudden surge of determination, Richard stepped back, facing Maria. "You're right. It's time I stopped running from my mistakes." "Then let us start there," she encouraged, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "You need to go to Jake. He's at home, waiting for you." In an instant, Richard was moving. Each step toward the door felt monumental, weighted with the fear of rejection, yet propelled by a newfound purpose. He registered the world around him: the polished floors, the stark white walls, the remnants of laughter from earlier, a gallery that had become a stage for his regrets. As he drove, the rhythmic sound of the tires against the asphalt seemed to sync with his racing heart. He thought of his son, alone and hurting. The thought twisted in his gut, an ache he had ignored for too long. "Just be honest," he told himself, glancing in the rearview mirror before turning onto their street. "Show him that you care." He parked outside their house, the familiar sight of their yard bringing a flood of memories. He recalled evenings spent grilling, laughing as they tried to toss a frisbee around. How had it all slipped away so easily? Taking a deep breath, Richard walked up to the front door. His hand hovered for a moment over the doorknob. Anxiety twisted in his chest, but he knew this moment was crucial. With a firm resolve, he pushed the door open. "Jake?" he called, stepping inside. The silence was deafening, amplifying the fear of what he might find or what he might not. "Dad." A voice floated from the living room, weak and hesitant. Richard's heart trembled at the sound. He found Jake on the couch, the television flickering images that were clearly ignored. The boy's gaze drifted to his father, eyes shadowed by exhaustion and hurt. "What are you doing here?" Jake asked, his words edged with uncertainty. "I came to talk," Richard said, feeling the weight of the moment settle over them. "I know I've messed up, and I've put my work ahead of you. But I want to change that. I want to be a part of your life, Jake." Jake shifted uncomfortably. "What is that supposed to mean? You can't just drop in like everything is fine. You missed my show?" Richard's chest tightened. "I know, and I regret it. I was so focused on how it could help my career that I didn't see how important it was for you." He knelt down to be eye level with his son, vulnerable. "I hurt you, and I'm sorry. You're what really matters, not awards or success." A flicker of something moved across Jake's face. Hope, hesitance. "I just wanted you to see my art." I thought maybe his voice trailed off, the weight of the hurt too heavy to carry alone. Richard reached out, brushing his hand against the rough fabric of the couch. "I want to see it. I want to see everything. Can you show me?" Jake hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but it won't be what you expect. It's not about being good for the gallery. It's just me. I wouldn't have it any other way," Richard replied, feeling a sliver of warmth break through the coldness that had settled between them. That as Jake began to rise, a tentative smile broke through his initial reticence, an indication that they might just be on the brink of something new together. Richard couldn't help but feel a rush of hope. But just as Jake stepped toward his art supplies, Richard's phone buzzed loudly in his pocket. The ringing seemed to echo in the room, instantly snapping both of their attention back to reality. Richard glanced at the screen, and his heart sank. An urgent call from his business partner brought the reminder of the world he was struggling to leave behind. "Jake," he stammered. "What? Are you going to bail again?" His son's voice trembled with disappointment. "No, I mean not this time," Richard promised, the decision lingering heavily on his mind. Was he ready to fully embrace this moment, or would he retreat back into the chaos of his business life? The answer felt more important than ever. Richard stared at the glowing screen, the words of his business partner flashing before him. Every logical part of his brain screamed at him to answer, to dive back into the chaos that was his life. This call could mean more money, more projects. But all he could think about was Jake, who was once again looking at him with those eyes, filled with hope, yet layered with hurt. "Just a second, Jake," he said, holding his finger to the screen. He tried to force a smile, but inside he felt the cold grip of conflict tighten around his heart. He stepped a few feet away, inching closer to the window as if distance could give him clarity. "Richard," his partner's voice boomed on the other end. "We need you in this meeting. You can't put it off again. The investors are getting restless." As the pressure mounted, Richard stole a glance back at Jake. His son was slowly picking up a sketch pad, staring contemplatively at the empty pages. Richard felt a pang in his chest. This wasn't just about art. It was about connection, about bridging a chasm he'd allowed to grow far too wide. "Yeah, I know," Richard replied, his voice almost a whisper. "But make a choice." His partner interrupted sharply. "You can't keep half-assing this. This company needs you." Those words stung more than expected. They were a reminder of everything that had driven Richard away from the life he truly wanted. Taking a deep breath, he turned his back on the window and walked back towards Jake. "I'm sorry, but I can't do this." Jake looked up, confusion washing over his face. "What do you mean? You said you wanted to be here." "I do," Richard urged, kneeling once more to face his son. He felt the tremor in his hands, the weight of the moment hanging, heavy and ripe for change. "But I can't keep running back to the business world and abandoning you." "Then don't," Jake said quietly, a hint of frustration creeping into his voice. "You always find a way to worm your way back into those meetings. Why is this time different?" Richard paused, holding his gaze steady, fighting the tide of guilt that surged within him. "Because I'm tired of letting you down. I want to show you that I care more than what I can give you with things, with money. I want to be present. I want to support you in your art." Jake's brow furrowed. uncertainty flickering again in his eyes. What if you don't have time for me? I'll make time, Richard promised, feeling a sense of warmth creeping into his voice. For art, for you, for us. We need each other. I need you to help me understand how to be there truly. After a moment of silence, Jake let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Okay, then let's do this. A tentative smile returned to Jake's face, a light piercing through the shadows. He reached for the sketch pad, flipping over the first few pages filled with hastily drawn designs. But you really have to promise me you'll show up, not just now, but moving forward. Richard nodded, feeling strength he hadn't realized was building in him. I promise. The phone buzzed again, this time vibrating harshly in his pocket. But instead of reaching for it, he opted to silence it. The act felt monumental, a quiet rebellion against the past he wanted to leave behind. All right, show me what you've got, he encouraged, leaning forward, anticipation racing in his heart. Jake's eyes lit up, and with a newfound confidence, he flipped to a blank page, sketching with fervor. Each stroke seemed to bring not only lines, but also hope back into their relationship, a spark that hinted at the healing to come. As Richard watched his son work, he wondered if he could truly let go of the life that had consumed him. If he chose this path, would he be able to stay the course? But just as Richard let himself feel the warmth of that thought, there was a knock at the door. The sound pulled him from his reverie. It reverberated through the room, surprising both him and Jake. Who could that be? Richard asked, glancing at Jake, a mixture of curiosity and dread swirling in the air between them. Maybe it's someone else wanting something from you, Jake said, the old bitterness surfacing. Richard felt the air grow thick again, and he realized their newfound moment of connection could easily be disrupted. What if this was another distraction? How would they face what was to come now? He took a step towards the door. Whatever awaited him could shift the balance they had just begun to find. With uncertainty building, he reached for the knob, breath paused, heart racing. Who or what lay on the other side? As Richard turned the doorknob, he felt a rush of anxiety swirl in his stomach. The room fell silent, the only sound the rapid beating of his heart. The door creaked open, revealing a figure he hadn't expected. Mary, their housekeeper, stood there, breathless, hair slightly askew. Her eyes were wide, sparkling with urgency. Richard, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's important. Richard's heart sank just a little. He had thought it might be someone from his business life, bringing news that would pull him back into that relentless rush. But here was Mary, someone who had touched their lives quietly, with warmth and kindness, yet another reminder of the life he was trying to navigate. Mary, is everything okay? He asked, his voice steadying as he caught a glimpse of concern written all over her face. It's about Jake, she said, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. Richard's chest tightened. He needs you. Right now? It's hard to explain. Is he okay? Panic began to lace his thoughts, his protective instincts kicking in. Yes. He's all right, but... Mary hesitated, shifting her weight from one foot to another. He's struggling with something. He's trying to share something with you, and I think it's really important for you both. Richard felt the blood rush to his ears. Just when he thought they were starting to connect, something else emerged to threaten that bond. What do you mean? I overheard him. He was talking to himself while he was drawing. It sounded like he wanted to ask you something deeper than just art. Richard glanced back at the sketch pad, where Jake had been lost in his work only moments before. Would hearing whatever troubled his son force him back into the spiral of demands he had been trying to escape? Can you just tell me what it's about? Richard pressed, feeling a sense of urgency growing deep within him. She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. He's afraid he's losing you to your work again, but he also wants to share his most important piece with you, a drawing that means everything to him. The weight of her words settled over Richard like a heavy blanket. The thought of Jake feeling anxious about their relationship broke something inside him. He knew time was ticking, that every moment he spent away from Jake's world pushed them further apart. Taking a moment to compose himself, he nodded. I'll go to him. Thank you, Mary. She stepped aside, allowing Richard to pass, but he felt her hand on his arm, a gentle squeeze. He just wants you to see him, Richard. He wants to feel that you're with him, not just physically, but emotionally too. With those words echoing in his mind, Richard hurried toward the living room, where he found Jake hunched over the sketch pad. The confidence he had seen earlier had vanished, replaced by a tight-lipped sadness. Jake? Richard's voice broke slightly, the sight of his son's crumpled posture tugging at his heart. Can we talk? Barely looking up, Jake nodded, gripping his pencil tightly. Richard took a seat beside him, the tension lingering thick in the air. He could sense Jake's hesitation, his walls rising up again just as they had started to fall. Mary told me that you wanted to share something, Richard said gently, hoping to coax the vulnerability out of his son. Something important? Jake took a shaky breath, his eyes flicking to the drawing he'd been working on. It's just a dumb sketch, he muttered, but Richard could see the way his hands trembled slightly. Nothing about art is dumb. Let me see it, Richard encouraged, keeping his tone soft, even as uncertainty nagged at him. After a moment, Jake turned the sketchpad slowly. With trepidation, he revealed a beautiful sketch, a giant, fantastical tree with sprawling branches, under which sat two figures, a father and son, looking out over an endless horizon. I wanted you to know. I still see us like this, Jake whispered, voice breaking. But what if we can't reach that horizon anymore? Richard's chest constricted, emotion pooling in his throat as he looked into his son's anxious eyes. Jake, I want to be there. I want to reach that horizon with you. You've got to help me understand. With a mix of dread and determination, Richard vowed to be the father Jake needed. Yet, the fear of the world outside loomed, the call and the deadline still waiting. Could he navigate this path of newfound connection while battling the demand for his old life? As Jake looked at him, searching for assurance, Richard felt the heavy air shift once more. There was hope, but it stood against the might of an uncertain future. Maybe we can figure it out together, Jake said quietly, his eyes shining with a flicker of optimism. Richard nodded, feeling a sliver of resolution forming. But the question lingered in the air, thick with promise and peril. What if choosing to reach for that horizon meant facing battles he couldn't predict? Before he could process it fully, the phone buzzed again on the table behind them. It felt like an intruder to the moment they were trying to create. What was waiting on that screen? And could Richard stay grounded in his commitment to his son when the world called out for him? Richard stared at the phone, the screen lighting up like a beacon, battling the warmth of the moment with Jake. Every instinct told him to silence it, to block out the outside world that was clamoring for his attention. But the phone kept buzzing, louder each time, as if it had a life of its own that he forced himself to break eye contact with Jake. He could sense the shifting energy around them, the fragile bridge they were trying to build starting to sway beneath unsteady pressures. Just give me a second, he said, his voice steady but his heart racing. Reaching for the phone, he glanced at the name flashing on the screen, a client he had been dodging this whole week. The urgency clawed at him. Yet, every part of him screamed to keep his focus on Jake. He took a deep breath, the decision swirling in his mind like thick fog. It's probably work, he admitted, his hand pausing inches from the screen. But I don't have to answer it. Not right now. Jake nodded, but Richard noticed his son's face was still cast in uncertainty. The weight of what lay ahead loomed larger than any phone call. Jake's hands trembled less now, but the anxiety lingered in his expression. You really want to be here with me? He asked softly, as if needing to hear Richard's promise out loud. Richard felt warmth flood his chest. More than anything, he replied sincerely, meeting Jake's gaze directly. This moment matters. You matter. It's just sometimes I get caught up in everything and forget that. Jake's shoulders relaxed a fraction, and Richard could see the flicker of hope igniting again. So, can I show you what I was thinking? He asked, his voice inching toward excitement. Richard relaxed fully into the moment, the phone fading from his mind. Absolutely, he said, his heart swelling with pride. Let us see it. Jake's face lit up as he eagerly turned the page of the sketchpad. Richard leaned in closer, his breath catching at what he saw. It was more than art. It was a vivid story, bursting with color and imagination. Each stroke of Jake's pencil breathed life into the images, a breathtaking landscape that felt like it held their shared dreams. Wow, Jake, Richard whispered, awed. This is incredible. His son glanced up, surprised by the enthusiasm in his father's voice. You really like it? I love it. It's beautiful. You captured so much. Look at that sky, those clouds, Richard encouraged, feeling the walls between them continuing to melt away. Jake smiled, a real smile, the kind that hadn't graced his face in what felt like ages. I wanted to show what a day would be like if we could just be together, you know? Like the tree. And us. Richard's heart thudded in his chest. The truth hit him hard. Jake was reaching out, expressing everything he felt in their estranged relationship through his artistry. You've got an extraordinary way of showing your feelings, buddy, Richard replied, brushing a hand through his hair. You have no idea how much it means to me that you shared this. But the vibrancy of the moment was abruptly undercut as the phone buzzed again, now insistent, urgent. The world outside was relentless, and Richard felt a pang of guilt. How long could he hold on to this beautiful connection before the reality reasserted itself? Jake's expression darkened slightly as he watched his father struggle with the temptation to answer that call. Is it important? He asked, his voice almost a whisper now. Richard looked back at the sketch, then at Jake's hopeful face, the choices pressing down heavily on his heart. I don't want to let you down, he admitted, the truth flowing out before he was fully ready to face it. Jake swallowed, his earlier pride flickering again with uncertainty. But if you have to, I get it. Richard's heart broke at the hint of disappointment in his son's voice. He could almost hear the ticking clock reminding him of time slipping away, and he felt paralyzed between two worlds, the excitement of a renewed bond and the demands of life that never stopped pulling at him. I need to choose, Richard said, feeling the weight of his words. I need to choose you. As he picked up the phone and silenced it, a little grin broke across Jake's face. But beneath that smile was a whisper of fear that lingered. They were at the brink of something meaningful, yet Richard knew the fight for their relationship was just beginning. With Jake's sketch in front of him, the horizon they dreamed of felt closer than ever. But would he be able to sustain that choice against the relentless tide of his obligations? Just then, Mary walked in again, her face bright and urgent. Sorry to interrupt, but Richard, there's something you need to see. Richard's heart sank at the thought of stakes rising again. What was it this time? And would it threaten the fragile bond he was trying to build with Jake? Richard turned slowly toward Mary, his heart a mix of dread and curiosity. The moment they were sharing felt too delicate to disrupt. He glanced back at Jake, whose face reflected the same confusion Richard felt deep inside. What is it, Mary? He asked, trying to keep his tone steady. Mary stepped forward, her brows furrowed with urgency. I promise it's important. It's about the project, and there are things you need to know. Richard felt the chill of anxiety creep in again. The project had been swirling in the background, a nagging fear that had been an ever-present shadow in his life. The thought of losing this new moment with Jake to the demands of his work was unbearable. Can it wait? He replied, softly but firmly. Jake was staring at his dad, his expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. It was as if he could feel the tension crackling in the air. Richard could see it in Jake's eyes. This was a pivotal moment, and he couldn't let it slip away so easily. Mary hesitated for just a second before taking a breath. I understand, Richard, but if you don't see this now, it could change everything. Richard nodded, thoughts racing. Could the project really be that dire? Part of him wanted to tell Mary to leave and give him a moment with Jake. But the pit of worry in his stomach reminded him of the other life waiting for him outside. All right, show me, he said, steeling himself for whatever news awaited. For Jake, the change in his father's demeanor seemed to dim the light that had briefly shone between them. Richard caught the flicker of disappointment in Jake's eyes again as his son moved ever so slightly away from him, retreating behind the veil of uncertainty that had hung over their relationship for too long. Just a moment, buddy, Richard said, even as he felt the distance growing. The regret of pushing Jake aside battled against the feelings of obligation toward his work. It was suffocating. As Mary handed him a file, he quickly glanced down. Numbers and projections slid past his eyes, but it was the picture attached a snapshot of a construction site that pulled him in. His mind raced. Wait, when did this happen? He asked, turning to Mary with alarm. The deal went south. We need to act fast or risk losing everything, Mary explained, her urgency amplifying with each word. The weight of the news sank in. It wasn't just about the project, it was about his reputation, his career, and everything he had worked so hard to build. Richard, Jake said softly, the worry in his voice breaking through the chaos of his father's work world. You don't have to do this now. Richard swallowed hard. He looked at his son, and in that moment, he saw a reflection of himself. The very past that had shaped him, the very essence of the bond he was fighting for, was staring back at him. "Jake," he said, his voice finally breaking through the tension, "we just started to reconnect. I don't want this to pull us apart again." Jake's eyes brightened, but only slightly. "Then let's not let it. Show her you can put it aside. I really want to show you the rest of my sketch." Richard glanced at Mary, then back to the file in his hands, grappling with the conflict. His mind screamed to act, but Jake's rooted determination gave him pause. There was a shift taking place, a decision teetering on the edge. "You're right," Richard said with newfound strength, finally realizing where he belonged at this moment. "Mary, I need you to handle this. I'm not ready to lose my son again. I can't take the risk." Mary's expression softened, understanding flooding her face. "All right, just remember, the stakes are high." With the weight of the decision hanging in the air, Richard turned back to Jake, ready to bridge the space that had threatened to swallow them both. But just as he began to feel the spark returning, the doorbell rang, echoing through the room like a foreboding bell, signaling the arrival of change again. "What now?" Richard muttered under his breath, the sinking feeling of uncertainty creeping back in. Jake looked up, worry etched into his features. "I hope it's something good, Dad." With a deep breath, Richard turned toward the door, not knowing what awaited them on the other side. And somewhere in that moment of uncertainty, he realized that sometimes revelation comes wrapped in the mess of life, not just business matters, but in the quiet, fragile moments that truly matter. Would this new arrival help or deepen the rift he feared? Richard opened the door, and the cool breeze brushed against his skin, beckoning for clarity in the air thick with tension. Standing at his doorstep was a woman he vaguely recognized. Her name escaped him for a moment, but the warmth of her gaze drew him in. She wasn't an unwelcome visitor. Rather, she carried a sense of familiarity, a connection tied to Jake's school. "Mr. Ellis," she said, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "I hope I'm not interrupting, but I needed to speak with you about Jake." Richard felt a ripple of anxiety wash over him. It was bad enough that he had already juggled the pressing concerns of work. Now, it seemed the universe was piling on personal matters as well. "What is going on? Is everything all right?" he asked, sensing Jake's eyes shift from him to the woman. "Everything is fine," she assured him quickly. "But I think Jake deserves to know something important." Taking a step forward, her posture reflected an earnestness, one that promised truth but took an immense amount of courage to share. Jake stepped beside Richard, leaning slightly forward, curiosity piqued. "What is it?" he asked. The teenage bravado faded, revealing a young boy eager for answers about his dad and his world. The woman hesitated, as if weighing her words carefully. "I'm Amanda," she introduced herself. "I've been working at the school as a tutor for some of the kids, including Jake. I've learned a lot about him, and I know he's been going through a lot lately. He makes me proud." She glanced at Jake, a smile touching her lips. "But there's more." Richard felt his heart rate quicken. The moment hung in the balance, straddling the line between hope and heaviness. Jake's eyes widened, a soft plea for reassurance reminding Richard of what was at stake. He didn't want to disrupt the budding connection he had with his son, yet here they were, faced with uncharted territory. "What do you mean?" Jake asked, eyes fixed on her. Amanda drew a breath, collecting whatever fortitude she needed. "Jake is so much more than he realizes, Richard. He has this unique talent, artistic vision. His sketches, they're incredible." She turned to Richard, direct and sincere. He has been channeling emotions that are deep within him, feelings he hasn't been able to share fully. He uses art as his voice. A wave of emotion surged through Richard. He had always known Jake had talent, yet it had slipped through the cracks of their strained relationship. If only he'd been attentive, if only he had seen. "Show me, Jake," he urged, his heart alight with a mixture of pride and regret. Before Jake could respond, Amanda interjected. "He wanted to share his latest piece with you." But she hesitated. "He's worried about how you'd react." Richard's chest tightened. "I want to see it. I'm here for you, Jake. No more distractions. Whatever it is, I promise to listen." The realization hit him hard. Shoving work aside now felt trivial compared to the chance of connecting with his son in a meaningful way. Jake looked from Amanda to Richard, searching for acceptance in his father's eyes. "I don't know if it's good enough," Jake stammered. "Believe in yourself," Richard urged gently. "This is your moment. Don't hold back." Jake took a deep breath, though the hesitation still danced in his posture. Okay, he finally said, retreating just enough to hurry back inside, leaving Richard and Amanda standing in the doorway. Richard could sense Amanda's eyes watching him, a mixture of concern and admiration painted on her face. He needs you, she said softly. Please be the dad he believes you can be. As she spoke, Richard felt all the weight of the choices he'd made and the gaps that had formed. He wasn't just facing a project. He was at a crossroads, where his actions could either strengthen his bond with Jake or push him away. Moments later, Jake came back with his sketchpad, a nervous smile creeping onto his face as he flipped it open. Richard's heart raced as he took a glimpse at what his son had created. It was raw and beautifully chaotic, a depiction of emotions bottled up over years. Before he could voice his thoughts, the doorbell rang again, louder this time, demanding their attention. Who was that now? Richard murmured, caught in a web of budding connection and new layers of uncertainty. Jake's smile faltered slightly. I hope it's not more bad news. Richard glanced at his son, a swirl of emotions stirring within him. Neither do I. With an impending sense of disturbance looming in the air, he made his way to the door once again, unsure if it would be another twist or a chance for healing. In that moment, he understood that sometimes the very things we're most afraid to face lead us to the answers we've always needed. What awaited them, however, was still cloaked in uncertainty, and Richard could only hope this new presence wouldn't complicate things further. Richard opened the door, his heart drumming behind his ribs. The scene before him shifted into focus. Standing there was a tall figure, a man dressed in a dark coat with an unmistakable air of authority. Something about him felt unsettling, and Richard could feel the weight of Jake's anxious gaze behind him, waiting for clarity. Mr. Ellis, the man said, his tone firm yet respectful. I apologize for the disturbance, but I need to discuss Jake. Who are you? Richard asked, instinctively stepping forward, filling the threshold with his presence. He could sense Jake shifting closer, the tension palpable. I'm David Hollister, a family lawyer, he said, his eyes narrowing slightly as he gauged Richard's reaction. I represent your late wife's estate. Richard felt as if the air had been sucked out of the room. What does that have to do with Jake? His voice was steady, but inside, a storm of confusion and dread brewed. It's important we talk privately about matters concerning Jake's future. David's demeanor was professional, but his words carried an ominous weight. Jake, however, broke the moment's intensity with an unexpected shift. Is this about Mom? He asked, his face pale but eyes fierce as he stepped forward, challenging the stranger. Richard shot him a quick look, silently urging Jake to hold back. The last thing they needed now was more chaos. Let us hear what he has to say, Richard said, his voice softer, trying to soothe both Jake's spirit and his own racing heartbeat. David nodded slowly, motioning as if inviting them both into the living room. I understand this is difficult, but the details need to be clear. There are some important decisions that need to be addressed. Richard exchanged a worried glance with Jake, who seemed caught between anger and curiosity. They followed David inside, the ambience within the house suddenly feeling heavier with every step. Once seated at the dining table, David spread out some documents. In the wake of your wife's passing, there are arrangements she made concerning Jake, things she wanted to ensure were in place for him. It's not just about the estate. It's about his future, too. Richard's mind raced. Could it be possible Jake had been left something? But why would it come to this? What kind of arrangements? He pressed, tension leaking into his words. There are funds set aside for his education, and David hesitated, looking at Jake as if he were a fragile object. His guardianship. Jake's expression shifted. What do you mean? I live with Dad. Yes, but given your circumstances, David took a moment, gauging Richard's reaction. Your mother designated a guardian that would step in should you be unable to fulfill that role. Richard felt like the walls were closing in. Designated? Why wouldn't she trust me? David shifted uncomfortably. It was meant to protect him. She thought I couldn't take care of him? Richard cut in sharply. Your wife wanted to ensure Jake would always have a safety net, a family nearby in case Jake was quiet, absorbing the new reality that was spiraling around him. Richard reached for his son's hand, but felt resistance. Jake, listen. Whatever this is, I'll fight for you. You're my son. The grief of the past mixed with present anxieties, and Richard found himself lost in yet another maze of what-ifs. "Dad, does this mean I could live somewhere else?" Jake asked, his voice small and uncertain. Richard didn't have the answer, but he could feel the shadows creeping back in. "No, it doesn't mean that. We'll figure it out together," Richard promised, though uncertainty gnawed at him. David interjected, "This is not a conversation we can dismiss. It requires careful thought. You both need to understand the implications." Richard could feel his pulse racing, the chaos of everything crashing down around him. This was about more than just paperwork. It was about Jake's well-being, about their future. And right now, it felt like everything was slipping away. Jake's gaze flickered between Richard and David, confusion gleaming in his eyes. And in that moment, Richard realized how much was truly at stake, not just for him, but for his son as well. As they sat at the table, a cloud of unresolved feelings hung overhead, waiting for clarity. "What happens next?" Jake finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Richard chose that moment to reclaim his resolve. "We'll figure this out, I swear. I won't let anyone take you away from me." But David's next words hung heavily in the air, suggesting that the battle was only just beginning. The air thickened with tension as Richard looked at Jake, whose eyes mirrored uncertainty. David's presence loomed, a reminder of the fragile nature of their new bond. Richard took a deep breath, drawing strength from the oath he had just made, fighting through the storm of emotions threatening to engulf him. "We'll fight for you, Jake," he affirmed, his voice steady. "Whatever it takes." Jake blinked, a flicker of hope dancing in his eyes. Richard felt a rush of determination surging within him. How could he allow this moment to slip away? After everything they had faced, they had to unite, not just against outside forces, but against the ghosts of their pasts. "Let us talk about these arrangements," Richard said, focusing on David. "What do we need to do?" David adjusted his glasses, flipping through the pages. "The first step is to understand what your late wife envisioned. She wanted a secure future for Jake, and that included maintaining the support system she had in mind." Richard clenched his fists. "Wasn't he capable of being that support? But I am here. I want to be the one Jake leans on," he insisted, the urgency of reclaiming his role as a father coloring his words. That a deep silence enveloped them, while Jake's face softened the more he watched his dad's resolve. Richard could see the shift, the connection growing stronger, like only a father's love could. "Richard, I understand that this feels overwhelming," David continued, addressing Richard's frustration. "But sometimes the best intentions are dictated by circumstance. What about the money for Jake's education and the future?" Richard pressed, desperate to grasp any lifeline he could hold on to. "Those funds are set. The matter of guardianship is about having a plan if you cannot provide the care he needs. But ultimately, it's your decision on how you want to proceed," David explained, keeping his tone professional and calm. Richard turned to Jake, who now looked slightly less anxious, as if contemplating what this all truly meant. "What do you want, buddy?" Jake hesitated, looking at the papers spread out on the table. "I want to stay here. With you," he said quietly, his voice trembling. Richard felt the emotions swell in his chest. "Then let us make that happen. We'll get through this together." A slight smile broke through Jake's nervousness. Hope blossomed in the room, and Richard realized that they could carve out a new path, one where Jake felt secure, open, and loved, where he felt seen. David nodded, the professionalism softening as he recognized the growing bond between father and son. "We can draft a petition for you to formally take guardianship if that is your intention." "Let us do it," Richard said firmly, glancing at Jake. "We will make a plan that works for us, as a family." The tension began to lift, shadows of uncertainty replaced by the sunlight of possibility. For the first time in a long while, Richard felt that his decisions could bring them closer. "Does that sound okay to you?" he asked Jake, reaching out, laying a protective hand on his shoulder. Jake nodded slowly, the corners of his mouth lifting in a tentative smile. "Yeah, I think it does." They sat in a newfound silence, letting the reality of their commitment wash over them. Richard didn't just see a son dealing with loss. He saw a child surrounded by support, with art as a way of communicating feelings. No outsider could disrupt what they were rebuilding, a family forged through trials and pain, now anchored in love. "Now, when can we see that piece you've been working on?" Richard inquired, not entirely sure how Jake would react. I want you both to see it, Jake replied, his excitement growing, the confidence creeping back. And in that moment, as the previous worries faded, Richard knew this was the start of something incredible. It wasn't just about claiming guardianship or navigating personal struggles. It was about being there, about recognizing how the true essence of success was built from the relationships cultivated, not from wealth amassed. With their hearts full and their spirits renewed, the boys stepped away from the table, ready to embrace what awaited them: the laughter, the art, and a flourishing trust rekindled. Soon, laughter echoed through the hallways of their home, the air electric with a new energy. Every stroke of Jake's pencil became a thread weaving them closer, every shared heartbeat marking the beginning of a new journey together. And as Richard took that leap into the future, he seized this moment of clarity. He had chosen love over power, and in doing so, he discovered that the greatest strength lies within the bonds we choose to nurture each day. Now, let us come together for one last push. You need to subscribe now to ensure you don't miss the heartwarming stories that follow. This is the moment to show your support. Your engagement means the world. Leave a like now to fuel the algorithm and keep this journey alive. Comment your thoughts and feelings about this ending. Let us know how this transformation resonated with you. And don't wait not even one more second to share this story with 5 friends who need to witness this powerful shift. Your support can change lives.